volunteers and champions of the Seattle chapter, please stand and just be recognized so that people can see who you are. Thank you all very much for your contributions of time. Ruby Minashi, you should stand as well. There's an intern here who worked at Pratham in the field. So there's a lot of supporters here, and we want to thank you all for all of your time, attention, your hard-earned dollars over the years. Thank you very much. My name is Varun Kamdar, and I am the president of the Seattle chapter of Pratham, USA, and it's going to be my privilege to introduce two of the fireside chat, the facilitator and our keynote special guest, Madhav, Chavan, and Pradeep Singh. So for those of you who are not familiar with Pratham, in 1995, through a UNICEF initiative, Madhav Chavan co-founded Pratham in Bombay. Since that time, he's led the organization, and it's grown from just impacting Mumbai to covering 2/3 of India and impacting 5 million children just last year in programs that include early education, remedial education, libraries, support for children who have dropped out of school, and vocational training for youth. He's been named a 2014 Asia Game Changer by the Asia Society and received the 2012 Weiss Award for Weiss Prize, which is an award that has been equated to the Nobel Peace Prize for work in education. So please welcome Madhav Chavan. Pradeep Singh is an IIT Delhi and Harvard Business School graduate. He spent the last 20 years building 2 private companies and successfully taking one to an exit. He spent 10 years before that at Microsoft as general manager and in various marketing roles. He's currently the chairman of Vidya Next, which is a personalized tuition startup that he co-founded in Bangalore, and his own company, Aditi Consulting. He is a founding advisory board member of the Pratham Seattle chapter and has recently been invited and accepted a position at the National Board of Directors for Pratham USA. He's a relentless supporter of Pratham and a reason why 90% of you are in the room today. So please welcome Pradeep Singh.
Thanks, guys. Thanks a lot for coming. And if there is a precious commodity we have, it's time. And I know every one of you has a million other commits. So thank you for coming, including the 2 most recent entrants. Yeah, so I invented this job called a chairman of Pratham Seattle. It didn't exist. And this happened last November, December. So let me tell you the context of why you're here. Because I'm here to actually engage you in an intellectually difficult problem. 15%, 20% of the country's economy and planet-wide does run on non-profits. Companies that don't make money, that don't generate profits, do not have stock prices, do not have reporting on earnings and growth and so on and so forth. I do not get the access to revenue and capital markets that the for-profit world we're familiar with. So what happens in that is that great organizations do really well in the for-profit business. The weak ones die. And there is market force which compels the best to have enormous impact. And that's Google, that's Microsoft, that's Facebook, that's most of our previous employers or current ones. It's characterized by that. That doesn't happen in the non-profit business world. I didn't really get it until I kind of dived into it. It just doesn't happen. Everybody talks to you about a cause. I have a lovely cause. Let's go and fix this problem or that problem. And there are causes on the planet. There are lots of causes. And to build you a heart-rending story isn't hard. So the revenue of a nonprofit comes from people who have to be convinced about the cause, who don't consider the efficacy of the product, who are not consumers of the product, and don't actually, therefore, vote with their wallets on whether this thing that's being delivered is an interesting thing and a high-value thing to deliver. So it turns out to be a really interesting problem. How do you solve the capital market problem? So in fact, you see it happen. There are 100,000 people who are doing something in education. I happens to be not 100,000 people who are doing something in search. You know, last time I checked, there was a very short list. The rest had just died. That's kind of, so that's where what it triggered my head. And the reason it triggered my head is because of Pratham. So I'm going to describe one day to you really quickly, and then I'm going to call my Madhav on stage. I fly into Lucknow. I'm met at the airport by a lady wearing clearly a Muslim lady. And I ask her as to what she does, and she runs UP for Pratham. Turns out that she's been running UP for 16 years. Where were you born? In Mumbai. How did you get here? Well, I was part of the founding team in Mumbai, and they decided to help. And, you know, Pratham helped me out when I got started off. And this is not somebody who's grown up on, you know, in a rich Bandra neighborhood of Mumbai. And I said, family? Yeah, I have a daughter. Where is she? In Mumbai. Oh, interesting. That's a kind of interesting start. I walk in next into a government school, and where Pratham is running an intervention program. Intervention program is you come in, because of 3rd to 5th kids, you break them out by who knows what, and you kind of do activity-based learning. Pratham is I'm not going to rob Madhav's thunder, so let him talk about that. But that's happening on one side. On the other side of the traditional classroom, you walk in, and the difference in engagement is immediately evident. Classroom, guy sitting in the back, somebody's just like, you know, shooting the breeze off, somebody's looking out the window. You look on this side, there are 25 kids who are like, whoa, every time you debate an argument, I disagree with you, somebody's got something else going on, somebody's doing something. There are 25 engaged learners. That evening, I go to a program they're running outside, a rural digital program, which we're going to talk about. And there are these 3 groups there, 6 kids each, with a tablet. They're looking at videos together, and one of them is looking at the solar system videos, and one they're saying number goes by, and that says 4:30, and the guy says, no, what is that 4:30? The guy says, it's a temperature, you idiot. There's peer learning going on. There's this enormous engagement. There's English language going on, and what happens is after they watch the video, one of them becomes a cameraman, and the other 4 enact it. So there's a series of very interesting engagement activities taking place. And then I come back to the city, and on my way back, I realized that the person who's taken me there is part of an 11-person team, which has been living in a house for the last 3 years with the other 10 members. And where does her family live? Well, 2 towns away. So here's an organization that can build a cult. I mean, this is a cult. If I could build a team of people, 6,000 people, who could do this thing, man, my market cap would be really impressive. Better than what I did the last time around. Though we did quite well. So interesting product. They measure before they go in. They measure when they come out. 23 years later. Revenue line. Let's build a startup, no? What do you think the revenue line is? What revenue line would we be proud of? We started a company which was great. 20 years later. How's 35 million? That's the dilemma. That's the stage. So what I'm going to do right now is bring Madhav on. I want to talk about the Pratham journey. We'll go through that piece. Then I want to bring Ben on, who is the most opinionated man I know about education, and who's done a lot in education. Ben Slivka, most of you will know him. I'll probably give you little things about him when he comes on. We'll do that very quickly because I have to keep Ben short to help me on that. And once we're done with that, we'll talk about how, after figuring out this interactive learning model and whatever lessons Madhav is going to talk about, how they're overlaying tech onto that and how they're thinking about what they're going to do next. And in that process, I think Ben and I will also talk about our lessons, because he did DreamBox and I did Within X for the last decade. Don't remind me. And we'll talk about what we learned, and then we'll talk about what he learned. And then we'll talk about specifically about what Nishant, who's director of engineering for them, Engineering Innovation, I think, is the title. And he'll talk about what he wants, what he's doing, and if anybody over here wants to help. That's a lot to try and crank through in an hour, and I've already taken 3 minutes more than I should have. Madhav. हम यहाँ बैठते हैं
बैठिए
जरूर बैठ के आपके लिए
कुछ नहीं
I think I
have a loud voice
I have a very loud
So do
voice.
I.
No. There are folks on Facebook who can't hear us.
Oh, okay.
Unless we talk to the mic. So
All right.
there's a Facebook live stream going on.
Okay.
So tell me, why this? How did you end up doing this? Well, let's start from there. What's a trigger for you to spend 25 years of your life doing nothing else?
You know, I started working on the adult literacy problem way back in '89 when the government at that time, headed by Rajiv Gandhi, announced a lot of technology missions, and along with those was a national literacy mission. And what I liked at that time was that along with the technology, oil, water, and all those kinds of missions that were there, the government and the Prime Minister and Sam Pitroda and others identified education as a key intervention that was required in the country. And they said that governments cannot make people literate. People have to make themselves literate. And I liked that. And to make a long story short, I got caught in the web of the government of India, which wanted unusual people to participate as volunteers. And so I was teaching during the day at the Bombay University Department of Chemical Technology, and evenings I started working in the slums. That's how I got started. Pratham came a few years later.
Okay. There what happens. Let's do the later. So now I got it. That's the hook that pulls you in.
Well, the hook was that the government mission for the adult literacy went down. 91, so Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, the economy was in trouble, we had to liberalize our economy and all those things. And what was supposed to be a movement of volunteers and mission, a campaign, became again a bureaucratized government program. So people like me sort of started walking away from it, and I was waiting for the next opportunity, which came when UNICEF started talking about primary education, and they started talking about creating what they called a societal mission, bringing together business, government, and civil society to understand problems of primary education and to solve them with all the resources that the society could bring together. And some people said, you know, get this guy, he talks a lot, maybe he can do something. And that's how they handed over the whole thing to me and said, see what you can do with the job, with the task of building this societal mission in the city of Mumbai. And if you can do it in Mumbai with all the complexities and all the resources, then maybe we have a model and that can go elsewhere in the rest of the country. Although that rest of the country was kind of whispered, it was not a very serious objective at that time. But what happened was when we started working in Mumbai, the success of what we were doing in Mumbai, or at least the idea of how to do it, caught fire, and people like Rohini Nilekani in Bangalore, the people, some ex-civil servants in Delhi, others, they started picking this up, and we started having Pratham Mumbai. We started with Pratham Mumbai, then there was a Pratham Pune, Pratham Delhi, Akshara Foundation in Bangalore, Pratham Patna, Pratham Allahabad. So the whole network of Prathams, urban Prathams, started coming up. And then after some time, there was some evolution of programs and our know-how and so on. From being a service delivery organization, we grew into an innovator in learning, so to say, because we identified, Pratham's motto is every child in school and learning well. The well wasn't there before. Somebody added a well afterwards, saying that learning is not enough, say learning well. That was 2000 something. But earlier it was every child in school and learning. So clearly the emphasis was in getting every child in school. But we realized very soon that it was not that the main problem was not getting children into school. Getting children into school was relatively easy. If you start a school, so children get enrolled.
Which you actually, even nationwide, the data on this is fairly good. So if you go back 10, 15 years, relative to then, they just did USSR 2017, which went out and assessed data, and about 85% of the kids between the ages of 14 to 18 are in some educational model. Either
are enrolled. Doesn't mean they actually go to college.
Or
sometimes,
school.
And those who have been educated in India, I can see some old timers, they know what going to college means. So, enrolling children in school was not the problem. The problem was children were not learning, and we started getting evidence of that. And our current CEO, Dr. Rukmini Banerjee, she devised a tool with all our colleagues It was a very quick assessment tool. And with that tool, we started finding out from community to community in so many cities and soon in the rural areas that nearly 50% children go to grade 5 not knowing how to read even a grade 2 paragraph. And that then became our tool to spread across India, because we wanted to do a survey saying that this is true of some communities in urban areas. What if we were to do a scientific survey of the entire country? And the opportunity was provided by the fact that the new government headed by Dr. Manmohan Singh came to power, and they levied a 2% surcharge, saying that we need to mobilize more funds for education, which is a good step. Nobody opposed it. So we suggested that maybe the government should come up with a survey that reports back to the people what the effectiveness of this 2% cess is. And the government was not about to do that at that time anyway. So we decided we'll do it ourselves.
Yeah, wait, let me come in here. This is very impressive. This is 05.
They decide to shut up now. Okay.
Wait. They decide we should do a national survey. This is execution. They get 30,000 volunteers. They test 900,000 kids, or some number between 700 and 900,000 in person. They tabulate the data and they report on the data within 90 days.
100.
Okay, fine. Can you imagine building a machine? Build a machine. Let's do this tomorrow. Let's find a new city. We should do this tomorrow in 90 days. Let's do it in Seattle. It's really hard to execute. How do you execute a national footprint?
Yeah.
It's why I'm in awe. I'm into work.
So the interesting thing was, when we decided to do this survey, I went to Dr. Montek Singh Ahluwalia, saying, I would like you, he was the vice chairman of the planning commission, and said, I would like you to release this survey. He had already said that, I like the idea and so on. He said, but you've not even prepared the plan. I said, the plan will happen, but you give me a date, because you may be not available. So he gave us a date, and he said, but are you sure you've not even got started? I said, that'll happen. So actually we put the last date of when we wanted to release, and then planned everything. So, and it happened in a country like India. To get that to happen, it's great fun. So if you want to know how that has happened, that will be a separate fireside chat.
All right, so let's jump forward. So they start by doing basically kindergarten, Balwadis, in Mumbai. How does Read India come about?
Do you really have time for that? So, how we started with preschool education is not as though we knew that we had to start with preschool education, although it turned out that it was the best thing we ever did. And the trick was that I didn't know what to do. I did not know what primary education was and what the problems were and so on. And people started telling us, why don't you do teacher training? That was like a flat answer everybody gave. And even today, if you ask people, they'll say teacher training is the answer, because people really don't know what else to do. So we started training the teachers, and at the end of the training, there would be evaluation forms, and the teachers would return the evaluation forms. In the Hindi medium schools of Mumbai, interesting people there, we started getting remarks on the evaluation form saying, don't mess with us. You think you know teaching, you are university professors. What do you know how to teach the slum kids? And they were right. And on the sidelines, people started saying that, instead of doing this, why don't you get started with preschool education? Our kids come to first grade without any preschool education, without any preparedness for the school. So they were saying two things. One was there was a need for preschool education, and the second thing is get out of our way. You don't want to come and lecture us. So we got the message, and we said, okay, let's do that. And we actually took a model that was already in existence in the municipal schools of Mumbai, and just tweaked it a little bit, and it started spreading. It was kind of entrepreneurial. One of our Pratham people, they were only 10, 11 at that time, would go to a slum community and say, who's good with kids? And everybody would say, that one. And that girl would say, what are you talking about? And he'd say, would you like to be a teacher? They say, but I'm a school dropout. It doesn't matter. Can you sing? Yes. Can you dance? Yes. Can you play with children? Yes. You are a teacher. And then said, okay, so now I give you 100 rupee stipend, and you can work with the parents. If the parents give you money, that's yours. I don't want to know. If they don't give you, don't come to complain to me. And it worked really so well that, and we did not control. People said, how do you control quality? Why is there a need to control anything at all? Let it spread like wildfire, because we had estimated the need was 3,500 preschool centers. And there's nobody doing it, and so why not try it? And it spread very quickly, in 2 years' time. The problem was nobody was going to give us money even for the little material that we needed. And I remember I used very different fundraising tactics at that time. I went to a gentleman who had just retired as a director of the Industrial Development Bank of India, government bank. And I said, I want to start 200 preschool centers. I need 400,000 rupees. He said, are you mad? People spend a lifetime starting 25 preschool centers, and you are telling me you're going to start 200 in 1 year? I said, no, that's in 3 months. After that, so he said, okay. I said, okay, let's take a bet. You give me 200,000 rupees. If I can start 100 preschool centers, then you give me the remaining 200,000. He was mad enough to take the bet. I was crazy enough to offer it. And I came back to our office and I told young friends of mine, I said, you know, I've taken a bet, 200,000, we lose, it's going to be a real bad situation. You start 100 preschool centers, I'm going to take you to dinner at the Taj. That was a standard of whatever quality. And within less than 20 days, 100 preschool centers started according to this methodology. And they said, dinner. I said, sure, but we have to start the next 100. So they keep telling me that you've not given us that dinner yet.
And he doesn't live up to his commitment.
Pradeep has to.
He doesn't live up to his commitment. So it's truth about this. But just for guys who to get context of here, 200,000 rupees is in today's exchange rate $3,000.
How much?
This man was setting out to start up 200 preschool centers. Unless you were thinking in US to begin with.
No, that's fine.
I still don't.
In today's exchange, but that anyway, whatever.
It's a 12 rupee exchange rate.
Yeah.
Yes.
No, so that was how we started. And the one thing we learned in this experiment, and that's been there every time, even today with a budget of 34 million, what you want to do costs much more than what you have. Okay, so we always are short on financial resources, but that doesn't stop us from doing things. Because what we know is if you go out there and say who's willing to help, and talk straight and say, look, I'm not here to offer you jobs, I'm not here to employ you, I'm not here to give you money. You need to work with your own communities. It's your communities. And this is the thing that that impressed me in the first place, as I told you. The government said, governments can't make people literate. They have to make themselves literate. It's your own initiative that's going to work. And when you talk straight like that, people are willing to work. And we've seen it so many times. 2 years ago, Rukmini launched a campaign called Lakhon Mein Ek. Lakhon Mein Ek, for Hindi, people who now understand Hindi, in English it's 1 in a million, but it's an order of magnitude different, that's all. Yeah.
No.
The other way around. Yeah, 10
lakhs. Right.
Okay. So, but it has the same meaning. So I am 1 in a million, which is like, we said we want to go to 100,000 villages. And so in every village we want that one volunteer who will say, I'm going to do something about my village. And we worked out a strategy. And again, we had only 30 days, not 90 days, okay? And in 30 days, actually we had put a ticker and said by Christmas of whatever that year was, 2014, 15? Yeah, 15. We need to see that go over 100,000. And it went 166,000. And piece of cake. People said, easy, we can do that. But so this idea that you can go and ask volunteers to participate quickly actually has worked, and we know how to do that. Whether it's 30,000 volunteers in faraway places, and there are exciting, interesting stories about how that works. Yeah. I have to write a book one day, and then so let's leave that for another fireside chat.
No, we leave that. I think the message we want to take away from the last few minutes conversation is this notion that as you think about things, you think about scale, and therefore you think about simplicity in the product offering. The reason why they can get away with not having real subject matter expertise in the instructor is because they're decomposing the teaching product down to the point where it can be rendered by somebody who doesn't have an enormous amount of expertise. Yeah. And that's an interesting, so to speak, product insight as to how you think about the product. It's different from the way most places think about education. We start by assuming that we've got to find these great teachers, and then of course we don't pay them enough, so therefore they don't stick around as great teachers, and we have this problem statement out there. So I think that's one really interesting observation. There's another really interesting observation. This is where I want to pivot now, and I want to talk about schools got created.
In the United States after the Civil War, 1870.
1870.
Compulsory government schools.
Thank you very much. He's my resident expert on the subject. Ben, join us, please. Okay, if you need me to introduce Ben. Oh, we must be aging. We must be aging. They don't.
I was a 20th century at Microsoft. Internet Explorer is my fault. And in the 21st century, I do angel investing and advising, and I'm learning about protein design and biochemistry. And I have done a lot of stuff with education. I have 3 children. I've been a trustee at my university for the last 20 years. I worked on the charter school initiative here back in 2012, and a few more things.
Right. And founded a company called DreamBox and wrote the internet memo. The rest of many of you won't have jobs here if it wasn't for the fact that this guy wrote an internet memo and then ran the IE team until IE3, got significant money.
Next slide.
Next slide.
Slide next slide.
The Ben Slivka side. What I want to switch to is talk about the fact that this thing called a classroom is so dated. And in my way of illustrating it, and everybody's got very sophisticated ways of it, he's particularly got very sophisticated, I think it was evolutionary psychology way of demonstrating it. So we'll come to that in a minute. Mine's really straightforward. You take a surgeon from 100 years ago, put him in an operating theater, and say, please do something. No hope. They have no idea what's going on. Take a teacher from 100 years ago and say, hey, Pythagoras theorem. By the way, we got a new thing. We don't have chalk anymore. Now we got this little fancy felt pen. Go. No problem. It's an industry which has not changed, whose structure has fundamentally remained the same forever, despite the fact that the context has changed so much around it. So the fact that efficacy in our current world is a problem is not surprising. In the Indian context, it's a disaster. The stuff that these guys did last year, there was a Right to Information Act that was passed to education that was passed about 7 years ago. So therefore, all kids should have been up to 8th grade. So they went and assessed 8th grades. The same other thing that they used to do, this time they did it 8th grade. Here's the good news. A very large percentage of the kids were in school. Here's the bad news. 25% of the 8th graders couldn't read 2nd grade level. 55% couldn't do simple division. Can you imagine what those 8 years have felt like for them? They've sat in class day in and day out, not understood a word of what's going on. Let's think about what their self-esteem feels like, how important they think they are. We've destroyed not just the fact that they can't read, we've destroyed them as humans, as kids growing up, as students. So that's my kind of to stay on. With that, you have a view on this.
Well, thank you all for coming tonight. What I'll remind you is that we have about 6,000 years of recorded human history. And the reason you can read the great Hindu texts from 6,000 years ago, or read the Bible from 2,000 years ago, or read Shakespeare, or read Aristotle, is because human nature hasn't changed in 6,000 years. And yet, we have created these industrial model schools, which really arose prominently in the United States after the Civil War, and compulsory government education. And so we're doing a vast experiment on humanity in the United States and India and every place else that has these industrial model schools. How many people went to industrial model schools? Right? Did the bells ring? Did you have bells ring? Right? Right? You had rigid curriculum. The assumption is everyone learns the same thing at the same time in the same way. We did not evolve to do that. We evolved to scrape a living out of the dirt. Right? I've been to 39 countries since 2014. I've been to rural India. I've been to rural Burma, rural China, a Maasai village in Tanzania. And so it's time travel. So I've seen people living without electricity or running water or motors or cell towers or the internet, right? Planking logs by hand. That's what human beings evolved over tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years, was to be put to hard labor as soon as they were able to. And yet we've created a system in the United States and other places where we have less than 2% of our workforce in the United States working in agriculture today. Less than 2%. In 1900, that was 50%, right? And 35% of agricultural output went to feed horses because we didn't have motors back then. And so, how many people here have a college degree? Raise your hand, don't be shy. Okay, good. How many people don't have a college degree? Anyone? Right, okay, good. How many people have a master's degree? Raise your hands, don't be shy. A shit ton of people have master's degrees. Okay, all right. You guys are very exceptional. Human beings did not evolve to go to K-12 school for 13 years and then go to undergraduate school for another 4 years and then maybe get a master's or a PhD. We did not evolve to do that. So we are very special people here. But I have 3 children. The first one crushed industrial model school. The other 2 were crushed by industrial model school. I mean, and really knowing what I know now, I should have homeschooled them and done a lot of other things, right? And so we have a lot of myths, especially among college graduates, about what school is and why it's a good thing. And we'd be way better off if kids learned by doing, which is how human beings have evolved for, for all these years, and did things with their hands and weren't jammed into these rigid, assembly line schools.
That was very good. That was very good. Thank you very much. I want to transition that piece to how you guys are thinking of, how did you, so because I heard when you guys were talking about today, I saw in the actions you took a sympathy with that point of view. That curriculum stuff, discard, focus on foundation, do it at the pace that the kid is learning at, do it by making them do stuff. The activity focus. Or am I reading too much into this?
Yeah, I mean, no, you're not reading too much. It's just that too many things are covered in this one small thing. Let's understand about actually when should be given more time. And because, limited but more time. What we discussed this morning, for example, is you start thinking of the world as a classroom. All children, let's say India, not the world, let's say India. And what you see is children who are going to first grade, the first cut. So and imagine it's a school like this, it's a classroom. And you have, 25 million children coming into the classroom. Out of these 25 million, 50% don't have preschool education at all. Those who go into the government schools, for example. And so they start lagging behind and they make up the back of the class and the remaining are in the front of the class. As you go to second grade, already some kids have not learned something, but the curriculum starts moving ahead and the teacher is teaching to the front. And the front keeps on shrinking. And as we see, as we measure now in all over India, we find that 50% of the kids can't read in the 5th grade, and by the time they are 14 to 18, you actually start seeing that a problem like if you borrow 20,000 rupees and the interest rate is 13%, how much interest do you have to pay at the end of the first year? This is young people who are actually going to handle money, who have cell phones and who are borrowing and buying and selling and so on. 80% of the kids could not solve that problem, 80%, and 85% are still in school or in college. And if they can't solve this, that means we have a problem. That means the class has shrunk, the front of the class has shrunk to just a few people. Like you said, we are exceptional. It may not be privileged, but we are exceptional. And so the question then is, how do you deal with this? This classroom is not viable, because the last 80% more and more are getting left behind or left out of everything that's happening in the world. And it's going to get worse with you guys working on artificial or whatever intelligence you have. And everybody's saying that this is going to be a problem. Unless you are highly creative, highly skilled, you are not going to make it. And the school model, as we've seen it, as it was presented to us as the one solution to mass education, is not working. And if you don't change that, if the classroom still remains like this, facing the teacher, and it's one curriculum, and then packed a lot of stuff in the 2.5 minutes that he spoke. So if you have just one curriculum for everybody, and there's no creativity, then we have a problem. So this classroom has to be changed. So if you take a visual look at, maybe you see a video, what you see is the Pratham classroom or whatever we do in the learning camps is not quite like this. Not facing the teacher. The children are split in groups and they are doing their own thing. And we've started doing this in villages after school hours, because we really can't change everything that's inside the school. But after school hours, children sitting in groups and deciding what they want to learn and how they want to go about doing things. It's early days, but we see tremendous enthusiasm from the kids' side. The parents think that's not learning. When it's time to come to, when it's examination time, they say, stop that, start learning. You know, that means read, mug up your books. Well, that's fine. That's going to go on. But at least the good thing is they're doing other things which are not this classroom facing the teacher or the blackboard. And they're doing different things. And that is the so-called evolution. Because we figured that that is the only way to do it. Because if you try to teach everybody, again you end up teach everybody the same thing the same way, then you end up again creating a classroom which will come to the, the shrink to the front and so on.
It's really good if you can visualize it, no? The classroom shrinking.
Yeah.
The back row and the back row, Sunil, you there, just no longer paying attention.
I learned a term the other day called LLB, Lords of the Last Bench.
Right.
That's an Indian term, I believe. I thought I was one.
That's right.
It was wonderful sitting at the back. Okay.
All right, but I think there are two things to call out over here. One which we briefly passed over. I think it's worth calling out because even though I try not to make this about cause, because I want you to just believe the cause is important, and then I want to make this about execution, it is time to just spend a minute and reflect on the cause. You can imagine these are going to be grown-ups. They will never make more than $1 a day. It's never going to happen. The odds just are so totally stacked against them. If you can't read, your literacy you can't divide, what's the odds you ever break that boundary? For that matter, what are the odds you ever really use a smartphone? If you can't really comprehend, you're going to live on the wrong side of the digital divide for the rest of time. And when we're talking about 200, 300, 400 million people planet-wide, 200 million people in India, if you can shift them across just that gap, and these guys are demonstrating that you can shift you across in a somewhat meaningful kind of way in a few weeks, in 8 weeks. If you can shift you across that gap, you can use that smartphone, you can comprehend. We will shift global GDP. I mean, think about it. You move 200 million people and you change their productivity to where they can use this device, you change their productivity by a factor of 5. So this is meaningful even in the context of sitting over here and saying what happens on the planet if you can make something work. And the reason I find this one interesting is that they accept the fact that what you can't change, you can't change. You can't change the school, and you can't change the curriculum, and you can't change the bureaucracy, and you work on it by influencing policy. You work on it by doing USR and getting the data published and getting hopefully people to read it. But then even within the constraints of that system, you build a learning model which works. So with that, because I'm going to go to tech, is there any way to summarize kind of short what were key lessons as time went by? I think you've articulated them. I'll just re-emphasize them. I mean, you basically shifted the learning burden to the learner. You took away the teacher from the front of the room. You used a large army of volunteers. How did you build these activities, these learning activities that the kids do?
Luckily, actually it will be a surprise to you that in Pratham, we don't have educationalists. We're all raw people, and we think common sense works better than big orientation into education, because all that is tried and tested methods, and if you start working with existing theories, then you're going to treat with existing solutions. And so we started doing things differently. Oftentimes your own experience tells you, for example, today I was watching a video, where did I see it? Something about a project called 3 million words. Anybody heard of this? So it's about mothers talking to their children, and this is in the United States. And they're told that you should talk to children more, and the more they talk, the more words the children hear, the smarter they get. And that's a very, we've stopped talking to children. And we put them in front of the TV once upon a time. Now you give them the smartphone and say, become an idiot. And so instead of that, if you were to do something, and this is common sense, and now we are going to analyze this, and somebody's going to study this and get PhDs on this.
Well, there's actually research at University of Washington. They've taken low-income families and monitored the vocabulary, both frequency and vocabulary choices, and gave feedback to the parents and had the parents increase that, and they showed dramatic improvements in learning for their children. So there's actually already science on this.
So if you then go back to traditional wisdom, and not traditional, but the people used to say, and they love to throw this line in educational seminars, it takes a village to educate a child. But in fact what we've done is told the village, shut up, and leave the driving to us. We are Greyhound. So, anybody know Greyhound anymore? The Greyhound used to say, leave the driving to us. It's like that. So the teacher, and so it was good for the parents as well. Put the child in the school, your problem to teach, not mine. Actually, we're going exactly in the opposite direction. The answers are saying that the community actually, the village has to educate the child. You cannot just leave it to the parent or to the teacher. Because when the school was conceived, the way it was, the world was not a literate, not an educated place, not that much knowledgeable about things. And the teacher oftentimes was the most educated person in a village or a community. And now if you actually look around, you see there's so many more people who know, who can do, and they have no role. They are told, do not contribute to the child's education. It's actually the exact thing around, like Ben was talking about becoming carpenters and so on. Why not? Why am I not sitting next to somebody who's designing a chair or who's creating something and talking to them? In a country like India, aeronautical engineering, this year's numbers, how many people are enrolled in aeronautical engineering? 17,000, right? Okay. How many people do you think? India, 50% population is engaged in agriculture, right? 30% of our GDP, I think, is agriculture as well. What is the number of people enrolled in agricultural engineering? Take a guess.
2,000.
16,000. So, I mean, where are the priorities? What is going on here? And then we talk about we should be like Israel and so on. How? I mean, come on.
No, before you start talking about this, how this is going. The rest is before this goes much further.
So what was the question again?
That's exactly my point. No, the question really was...
So the methodologies that we came up with, you asked me how we came up with. The answer is common sense. And we first were worried that, this common sense doesn't look right. But when we started testing, for example, where did we get the idea to learn to read? Where I got the idea from. I used to tell the story about my daughter and how she learned to read. I didn't know she had learned to read. Her mother used to read to her every night, and occasionally she would say, why don't you read to her? And I used to read, but I can never do one thing straight. So I used to drop words, and she would be reading with me with a thumb in her mouth, and when I dropped a word, she'd say, So I said, so what? So where does it say tiger? For that moment, the thumb would come out and say tiger, and then her thumb would go inside. And then one day we went to the airport to drop off her aunt, and she said, I'm hungry. And like a good father, in those days there were no restaurants in Indian airports. And I said, there's no restaurant here. She said, there is. I said, there isn't. She said, yes, there is. I said, where? Snack bar. I said, how do you know? And of course she got what she wanted. The point, and I used to tell this story, I said, how the hell did she actually learn to read? Because somebody was reading to her. She was engaged in this process of reading. And then there were some alphabets floating around. She went to a nursery school, as they call them, and she actually got it all together. So if you give multiple stimuli to children, throw them in a literate environment, give them stories, give them words, give them pictures, give them, books, it'll happen. And actually that's how it happens. Instead of making it too much of a structure, you throw them in. That's how our children start learning to read. And the other children don't get that environment. Creating that environment was as simple. Now people can do a lot of training. We, in fact, in the first periods of our training, we had to tell people, do not try to teach. Because everybody in the villages was very eager to become a teacher. And so it took us a long time to get these volunteers to say, you are not going to teach.
Be a coach.
Yeah, be a coach. Or just be a supporter. Just stand around and say, wow, this is great. Very difficult to do. Even today, it's very difficult to do. So, and this works. We're doing it with the tablet. We just came up with a small app called Kahaniyon Ka Sheher, City of Stories. The app opens with a story, and we saw this. It opens with a story. The story is led with highlighting, and kids who do not know how to read, even alphabets, love listening to stories as they're being told. And then after the story is over, you go back to the page, and the page says, the app says, where does it say tiger? Where does it say lion? Like I played with my daughter. And kids try to guess, and the app tells them whether they're right or wrong. Then they have a choice of playing with alphabets and words and so on. What we find is the average use was something like 50 minutes, but the kids read the story and engage with the story for something like 25, then play with the games for about 10 to 15 minutes and then go back to the stories again. Story is what does it. So we have to focus on that and say, don't worry about making games. If they love stories, then give them stories and figure out how that is going to lead to. So this is where the observation actually is going to help. So a lot of it is in mathematics. What is the key thing that you need to get the children to learn? There are two things we found. One of our workers, leaders, really Meera Tendolkar, long ago said that she was working with a child who was finding it difficult to learn. She just patted him on the back and said, you'll do it, it's okay. And the kid actually progressed. And this is not just once. It is well known that if you just empathize, give affection and support, children run. Where is that? That's missing in this classroom. And that is the key portion. And how do you give that? And then there are things like, okay, if you learn place value, then you learn most of mathematics, or arithmetic at least, not mathematics, arithmetic. So things like that are common sense. Focus on that and doors open up. I think I've talked too much. Ben, take over. No, don't let him talk. Don't let him talk. Ben.
Go. I think it's actually a reasonably interesting transition because in a sense there were two things that we heard here. One was empathy works, and the second is engagement works.
Yeah.
If you can get the kid really engaged with what you're doing, and if you're not speaking, teaching down to him, if he's learning from because he wants to learn, that works. Now this is interesting because this is actually a very good transition to Ben, because this is what DreamBox set out to do.
DreamBox Learning. Has anyone used DreamBox, or has anyone's kids used DreamBox? A few. So I had the idea back in 2005 that I would build a massively multiplayer online game, which instead of shooting things, you would master all of K-12 learning.
No small dream. The Windows boys.
That's right. People had this idea before. So anyway, what we started with was we said there's literacy and math. Literacy seems hard, let's do math. And then we said math builds on itself, so let's do early math. So we did K2 math. So we started the company in 06. We launched K2 math in 09. We had third grade in 2010. Then we sold it to Reed Hastings, who actually bought it through a nonprofit foundation. So I'm still an investor in DreamBox, and I get quarterly updates, but I don't have any operational or governance role there. And the company has continued to grow. It now has an offering that's most of K-8 curriculum. There's a few little bells and whistles in some K-8 schools. The vast majority of customers are school districts. And I think the last time I saw, DreamBox is in, I think, 10 or 12% of the largest school districts in the United States now. So it's got some interesting penetration. But if you look broadly at educational technology and penetration, if I ask you who's the leader in educational technology, you'd kind of go, blah, 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 I don't know, right? Because there isn't one, right? There's no Microsoft or Google or Facebook or Amazon of educational technology. And I think it's hard because in the classroom experience, as we've talked about, you've got all these competing demands. You've got curriculum and standards and this thing and that thing and the other thing. And so it's very hard for a classroom teacher to carve out time for kids to actually do some self-directed learning. And the whole idea of DreamBox is it's not a rigid path. The kid sits down, starts doing it, and it hunts around and tries to figure out where the kid's at with math and then puts them there. And if the kid is going quickly, then the lessons speed up and they get less stuff. And if they're struggling, they might get sent back to some earlier lessons. So it's a very sophisticated, adaptive environment. And so that's where DreamBox is today. It's far from the vision I had, but these things are a lot harder than you would hope them.
Question here. Is there an assumption in DreamBox that there's a second human actor? Or is it me, the learner, and the computer?
So the vision was that there would be no second human actor. Now there's a book called The Diamond Age by Neil Stevenson. Has anyone read The Diamond Age? Maybe a couple people. So in that case, there is a technology software interface, but there's actually a human actor somewhere off stage doing things to create that kind of personal engagement. Our idea was that you wouldn't need to do that, but I had a bunch of ideas. So one idea was pure learning, right? And so if you have that's why it was going to be a massively multiplayer online game. So the idea was that it would be a platform where kids could come together and work with each other to learn. And that part has not been implemented yet.
And that's hard to pull off from a tech point of view. The reason I bring this up is because I've also spent a decade trying to build tech for schooling. And so I'm just going to give you my quick lessons. Here are the lessons I had. The reason I asked the question about me and the computer is the thing we found, and then when we went and researched this stuff academically has been found, and is that if there is not a human enforcer enforcing your attention, it's really difficult to keep you there. What happens is that you're meant, you see, when we build videos and say, I'll teach you physics by having, this great
academy.
Yeah, this great teacher here, rather than this really a mediocre teacher. Clearly this one will be better. The thing we forget is then that when that poor mediocre teacher is talking to you, he's enforcing your attention by looking at you. You really can't look away. It's just bad form. You're sitting at the back, somebody's going to throw chalk at you. At least you have to pretend to pay attention. As soon as you take that forcing function away and you put the screen there, the brain says, oh, this is nowhere near as good as the Shah Rukh Khan movie I saw yesterday, or the National Geographic thing I saw yesterday. I mean, this is kind of, really mediocre on the spectrum of stuff that I see on screen.
Strictly from a production value.
It's boring and it's dull, and my attention span doesn't hold. So it was like a big wow lesson. We thought it would be no problem. Just replace bad teachers with great teachers and video and work. It took a bunch of time to realize kids just don't pay attention.
And this is back to my comment that human beings for hundreds of thousands of years have learned from other human beings. That's what our genetics are programmed for, right? And to expect somehow we can create some synthetic experience with a device, and somehow that would be a thing that would appeal to young brains is somewhat delusional.
Well, it turned out to be quite delusional because I spent a bunch of time doing this and a bunch of money doing this, and it was really quite unfortunate having to learn this. So then we had figured out that, the reason why people watch videos is because when that tap is broken, they go watch the video. When you have a forcing function, there's something which isn't working, I'll watch it 3 times, I'll rewind it. So we switched and we said, okay, the forcing function will be practice. We'll give you lots of practice, and then if you don't understand something, there will be a little button over there which you click on, will show you the relevant context so that you kind of understand it. So we're saying, okay, we'll create a forcing function differently. So we're not the only folks, I mean, in the sense that if you think about this at a large scale, and I was trying to, just caution Madhav as he invests more and more of, your money into this. You notice I said your money. That this tech business has been going since 1950. Plato was written in 1950. And really today, 80 years later, as Ben pointed out, it's hard to find a significant player in the category. So it comes with risk, it comes with challenge. The one-on-one model doesn't really work. The classroom we know is already failing. We just killed that one. So there's this alternate mechanism. Put these kids together and say, feed each other. So with that, why don't you tell us about Prodigy? Because they have taken to market 2 years ago technology that builds on that group model.
Nishant is waiting in the wings. You probably said you would introduce.
At this point,
yeah, please.
Director of Engineering Innovation. It has been with Pratham for now 4 years. And
get your own share.
Get your own share. Thank you.
They're my chairs.
You might have joined in.
Yeah, this is good.
It's good together, so we're in frame.
Oh, we are in frame.
Yeah,
Are we in frame?
This on the side.
Yep. Come, sit. Thanks.
Tell them about the model.
Okay. So the on stage, and he's going to tell you about the stuff that they've taken to market now about 2 years ago, and they're evolving it.
Sure. So I'll start with what was the thought behind the Prodigy initiative. Pratham has been working with technology right since its inception. We have been using radio channels when they were radio shows when they were the technology back then. Then we produced some TV shows because that was the way to mass education. I think Pratham was the first organization to get into computer-aided learning in schools, and right now that is a big program that we run with a lot of schools. So there was a school program where we were working with Vodafone Foundation, and what we were doing there is we again had a device in a classroom, and we had lessons on top of the device which could be used to as a precursor to the class itself, so that the teacher can use it to better explain probably the concepts that are there, that today's lesson is about. The results that we were seeing, or I would say the kind of usage that we were seeing from this device, were pretty abysmal, because I could give out the numbers. There were for every week the average usage was about 8 minutes. So that means the device was and the content was not being used. That's when Madhav had a thought of why don't we take the technology out from the regular construct where we have put it and give it in the hands of children. So we went about purchased some 3,000 tablets and distributed it in 400 villages. The way we did it was we asked children in the age group of 10 to 14 years to form their own groups, irrespective of the grades they were in, form a group of friends that they want to learn with. So 2 groups of 5 children each were given one such tablet, and a mother from each group was made the custodian of the tablet. So children were going to school, but when they got back from the school at about 4 p.m. or something, they went to their mothers and asked for this tablet and sat together in their own groups and started learning from the content that we have put inside the tablet. The content was primarily science, maths, and English communication. It was based on the grade curriculum, but it was not exactly the grade-based learning. It was familiarity. It was trying to get them engaged. So from the initial experiment, there were some learnings that we got. One of the learnings was that these devices are well taken care of. Of all the devices that we gave out to the children, and we had Lenovo tablets that we were purchasing and giving out. We reached out to Lenovo and asked them, what is the average loss or damage that you see in the tablets that you normally sell out to customers? They said our number is very close to where you are. So we were at about 15% damage back then, and right now we have around 16,500 tablets distributed, and out of that I think only 150 tablets were damaged beyond repair. So one great learning was that children do take good care of the device because it is their device. It is not a school device. It is their group's owning, so they take good care of it. And this learning was actually again from the early days of Pratham, where we gave out books where normally the books were kept in the school, and because otherwise children will tear them down and they will not take good care of it. Pratham started giving books in the hand of children. This time we upped it a notch and went with tablets, which are much more expensive than books, but we were proven right. So the first lesson was that it is taken well care of and the children like to learn, they sit together. We went about creating activities because Pratham really believes in the activity-based learning model. So the tablet for us, right from the word go, was not the single solution or the ultimate solution for learning. We knew that it had to be the trigger. The children would watch something on it and they had to do something with their hands. So there were a lot of experiments, science experiments that were put on it, that you could get material from the community itself and do it on your own. Children took great interest in it. We had English communication video, and this was not regular English learning. These were simple communication scenarios like, hi, my name is Nishant, hi, I'm Pradeep, how are you, I'm good, how are you, I'm good, thank you, bye. So this is one such communication. Then it goes about interview your mother or interview someone in the community, talk about your favorite actor, talk about your favorite movie. These were some communication scenarios that we recorded, that we shot, and what the children that we shot it with were children from the same community. So their pronunciation, their accent, the way they were talking was exactly like the children that we were reaching out to. This gave them the kind of confidence that we can do it on our own. So at the end of every video, we asked them that, can you do it on your own? They flipped the tablet around, turned on their camera, and started recording their own videos, doing all these role plays. And Pradeep could be helping me out here by probably talking about his experience when he went to the village, because this was quite an epidemic there.
It has some very interesting consequences. There's this group of 5-6 motivated kids. But they're not just interested motivated kids talking to each other. I'm this stranger who's arrived in town in a village. Clearly the guy's got an accent. He arrives in a car. That's a strange beast to begin with. All kinds of problems with it. The kids are really keen to talk to me. Like, you know, everybody's like muscle in and say, I got something to tell you too. And I think part of it came from the fact that they've spent this time. being either on the other side of the camera, being this side of the camera, building this stuff. They're just articulate, confident kids. That activities made them feel stronger about themselves. It was a spiritual moment.
So the first year for us was learning how groups behave and whether groups learn together, and how can we construct these kind of learning spaces together where children form their own sort of go into a self-organized learning environment and learn based on the content that we provide them, and also from the community and environment that they have around them. So after the first year of learning, what we have now started doing more is building tools that could enable this kind of a learning in a non-teacher environment, where we don't have someone giving feedback to the children. We are trying to use technology exactly there. Instead of being the technology being the silver bullet solution, we are using it specifically for learning outcomes, mapping it exactly to that. One such example is that for language learning, we use a lot of speech synthesis. So our applications and games have got English and Hindi speech synthesis inbuilt into them, and it works offline because one thing that I forgot to mention, all these 16,000 tablets work without internet. The content is preloaded onto them, and our facilitator goes, who has 6 villages to take care of, does not teach again, but goes around conducting learning activities with these children, engaging them in learning, and also at the same time helps us with the data collection and upkeep of the tablet. So speech technology and vision processing and things of these sort, we are trying to exactly map technology pieces to learning outcomes and build on top of that, so that the vision of a learning community, a community that can indulge itself in lifelong learning, comes to life. And for that, we are trying to work hard on the tools that are required.
That was great. You were also on point to actually see if anybody wants to help you with problems that you've got. So why don't you talk to that a bit?
Sure. So I know a lot of people are here from the tech background. So when we started using speech, the reason we did that was when we are trying to get English communication or English lessons out there in the community, we don't have someone in the community who already knows English pronunciation that well. So we needed a feedback, we needed a check. And that's why we thought, why not use all these technologies that are already being used for commercial purposes. But what we forgot, what I forgot because I was responsible for it, was that these technology pieces are designed for commercial purposes. So if you pronounce a word incorrectly, the technology will try to guess the word that you are saying. And in that automatically comes in an error. So trying to break it down to a specific problem, we don't want the speech recognition service to guess. We want it to go for phonemic conversion, so that we can know that if, I'll use a Hindi word, if the word is Kamal that you have to read out and you read it as Tamal, the speech tech right now will give you Kamal because Tamal is not a word for it. But what we want to know is the phoneme where you have problems, so that we can reiterate over it and give you the kind of corrective path to learn more on. Similarly, along with the problem on speech and other AI-related technology pieces that we are using, the big challenge is with the data that we are collecting. So, and I have this number always ready, and I have been in touch with some people at Microsoft earlier. We collect about 29 million rows of SQL data every 6 months, and it's coming in and in every 6 months. The kind of data that we have, it has a timestamp on it and the user activity. Unfortunately, these tablets are offline, and children love playing with the dates. So I get sessions from 1937 and 2048. Right now we have figured out a solution for it, so that the app tries to use the GPS time when it launches to try and get some corrective nature on that data. But the point here is that the data that is being generated has insights on how groups behave, how groups learn together, and how can we transition the kind of learning environment that we have right now, where a teacher is instructing, into a more deconstructed learning environment. And what are the drivers, what factors influence a group's learning behavior? All of that insight is sitting inside that data. We are doing some tertiary analysis of it, but to dive deeper into it, we'll need expert help from data scientists and people who can model it for us and come up with more insights.
So he was telling me the model they've already got working is that they have volunteers who help either in specific mentor roles with the developer, So somebody who's willing to put in 3 to 4 hours a week will basically, you'll help review code and have ideas around that. Or groupthink, groups which are doing, okay, so they do a paper on their scalability challenges, or their paper on speech and what they're trying to do with speech synthesis and why the Google APIs are failing. Where's Shudong? Didn't come. So if anybody's interested, we'd love to get some help. So that was part of the issue I wanted to throw out.
I would like to just add the last thing here, that the learning communities that we are trying to get to. The challenge here is that internet penetration is increasing in India, but the data cost is still a barrier. And as an organization, probably someone can take care of it, but individuals would not. For that, what we have come up with are mini clouds or sort of local content servers that we are setting up. It's based on a low-cost computer called a Raspberry Pi, and it costs around $150. So this year we are going to set out 1,000 such local content servers in 1,000 communities, which will be a place for people to get content on whatever they want to learn, because right now the tablets have limited memory, so we can put in as much as we can. But with this kind of a system, we want them to take what they want to learn and distribute it amongst themselves, use their own smartphones, because that penetration is increasing as well. So that's the next thing to which we are progressing.
Beth, any observations? If there are, tell me if you have any, because I'm going to flip this around. I'm going to open this to you.
Time for Q&A.
And before I transition to that, because I want you to give you a moment to think about stuff that you've just heard, I'll just net out for you. The net you heard really was, we started with the scale of the problem and the frightening data, that the problem's not going away. If we just put our head under the sand and say, hey, there are people who are going to solve this problem, well, it hasn't got solved in 20 years. The second piece, basically, statement was that Pratham has just good, solid data that you can change the model. You don't have to do it in a classroom. It doesn't have to be structured the way we assume planet-wide that education has to happen. And it's not theorem. It's not like, oh, I've got an idea. I mean, notice the scale. Oh, let's test this tab. 3,000 of them with 2 groups each, which is, let's do a test with 35,000 kids. So they scale. They don't test stuff by 5 kids in a room, I'll come out of the theorem. I'll go out and test it with 30,000 people and see if it works. And if it works with 30,000, I'll use that data to be able to go across. So I think that's a second fairly interesting thing, I mean, for me, very interesting observation. Then the third is, from the guys who've got, scars on their backs building ed tech. This has been, and somewhat enlightening perspective. It's really solving the problem the way we should solve technology problems. We just don't. We come up with good technology ideas and say, hey, this should work. And this is kind of the way I approach the problem. The way these guys approach the problem is that, okay, we have an instructional model that works. And what tech can I build on top of that to be able to enable that system to work? So I see those as my, kind of my 3 big takeaways from here. Questions? How about disagreements? I mean, that would be so much more fun.
There we go.
Got a new good man.
So is you consider Pratham kind of the vanguard and the frontier, or there's some tail lights you guys are looking at in China or in Africa, or is kind of Pratham out there and there are no tail lights, and Pratham is the tail light other people are looking at for education?
Madhav, you get this one.
I don't know what he thinks. I can tell you, it's usually good to just do things yourself and not worry about whether you are the vanguard, the front or the back or whatever. If what we do is relevant, and we've seen this with the annual status of education report, that simple testing tool that we created and the method of testing children to figure out very, very quickly what level you are reading at and what help you need. That when we did, we were not thinking of the world at all. We were not even thinking of India for that matter. We just wanted to show people, less educated people in slum communities, saying that, look, test your kids. You don't need experts to test your kids. Test your kids and figure out that there's something wrong. And these scenes were very common. They would test the kids in the village, and the mothers would beat up their kids. You've been in school for 5 years and you can't read. They wanted to beat up the teachers. They couldn't do that. Yeah. But forget the beating part. There were a lot of cases when the head of the village would say, "My God, I didn't think this was true." Not only that, the leaders in the Indian government said, "We didn't think this was counterintuitive." They said, "This can't be." Now that waking up started happening, and today what we do is repeated in 13 African countries. It's done in, so if people wanted to take it away, and this is where I use words very differently. So Pradeep keeps talking about scaling, and I keep talking about spreading. The scaling idea is what one consultant friend of mine said, "Madhav, this method we should take like McDonald's." I said, "No. What about Chinese restaurant? It's the same menu, but everybody can own one around the, and in different countries the flavor is different. Why not that?" And that is more educational and less commercial. Scaling is commercial talk. I don't like that. I mean, yes and no. I think where we are doing things. If this turns out to be a game changer, so be it. If not, we'll learn from many others and say, "What do you think? What do you think?" Yes, Ben, you're inspired.
Well, I think your story points out an important thing, is that in most cultures, including the United States, if a kid's not doing well in school, we blame the kid, right? Or we blame the parent. That's the poor family, the parents didn't give enough stimulation to the kid, or the kid's lazy, blah, 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 whatever. But really, the problem's not the kid. The problem is the structure of school is wrong. But we hold on to these myths very firmly in our country and other countries about these things, right? And we have these vast myths about school, which most of them are just wrong.
Yeah.
We have one
quick last one. No, I'll just end it there. Just to there is one piece which today we were talking about this today. That one tail light, so to speak, a model that has been inspiring at least is the hole in the wall experiments.
School in the cloud.
Which never school in the cloud, but 15 years ago, the way it began was, you remind me of the gentleman's name, you know him very well.
Mitra.
Yeah. So Mitra put a PC into a slum, how these borderlines define that slums on this side, and this is like, nice area, and he put a computer there. And it was just interesting to observe them. He observed the kids who had never used a computer before. Many of them didn't know how to read English, and didn't know any of the stuff. Kids just self-driving themselves. So that actually is a seminal piece of research that happened almost 20 years ago.
No, it's happening now. It's gone way beyond that. You are 20 years behind, my friend.
Kind of.
Yeah. And please just search Sugata Mitra and you will find a lot of inspiring material in what he's doing. So yeah, I had conversations with him, I learned things from him, but didn't want to do exactly what he's doing. What we are doing is quite different, well, substantially different. But the core is that children can learn on their own. It's not throwing out the adult in the picture, but their role is substantially changed. They are not teachers, they are helpers, encouragers, and so on.
Okay, one question back here. We'll wait for the camera to turn.
Oh, the camera has to switch around. I thought you were now on stage. Or most precisely, you're on Facebook Live.
First of all, Madhav, thank you very much for coming here. And obviously, and Ben, good to see you. Sure. Clearly Pratham's story is just absolutely amazing. And I love the way that you differentiated between expansion and scale. Mm-hmm. And clearly that you're using technology. But you also, Kim and others have done amazing research work on the impact of Pratham and how it has expanded. But you keep talking about learning and learning outside of the so-called beaten up education system. But then what happens to these kids when they go back to that same education system, and how does that learning translate into knowledge that they will need to thrive in a community? Because you're talking about kids that are very young, they've learned some rudimentary stuff, and then what?
Absolutely on the dot question, and one that's that I've been thinking about. I can't say I know the answer to that. while all these children will continue to go to school. We are not telling them. So for example, our motto, I said, is every child in school and learning well. And I suggested to some of my colleagues, why not make it every child not in school and learning well? And there was a virtual revolt. And some people really were mad at me, saying that, these are first generation learners, they're going to school for the first time. What are you thinking? So that's out. The children will go to school, even if it means going to a daycare center. Okay, let there not be learning, but it's a place where everybody goes, and let that be. So I'm not going to mess around with what the school is doing. If the school likes what we are doing, they will take it up. As I said, the spreading and the sort of a diffusion into the school will happen. It's already many places people are sensitive to some of these things, but the system doesn't reform itself. Now, where we are concerned, as we, in the case of Read India, I didn't quite complete that answer at all. We decided that the reading, ability to read and the ability to compute are two critical abilities that children should learn. I can't teach them the entire curriculum, but if they don't know how to read, then they can't read anything on their own either. So we focused on reading. So we focused on basic early arithmetic. And that's what we could do as an NGO. We are not a whole system, A. So similarly in this case, what will probably happen is we'll zero in. Like next year, we are zeroing on 3 or 4 things that we want to do. One is we want now to focus and say how much. So there's micro courses, so to say, or mini courses in English that we are going to give kids, and they can be tested and given certificates right there. There's an idea floating around. I won't talk about it now because it will take another half hour. But tell the children, okay, you can get level 1 certificate, level 2 certificate, and so on. So we start certifying the kids, and we know this works. And the kids will jump up. And so English is one thing that I want to get started with. Second is this problem of 14 to 18-year-olds not being able to solve a simple functional arithmetic problem. Now, I can't understand why we don't teach children with calculators. I played a game with the kids. I created a game called Calculator. So the game, it's calculator. The game is simple. On one side you see a problem. 64 chocolates, 16 friends, they have to be divided. How much does each one get? The first answer is don't divide it. I give it to me. But the second one is you say 64 divided by 16. I don't know the answer. I don't know how to do this. There's a calculator. All you do is figure out that the functionality to use is division, and you get the answer. 2 things. One is you should know what functionality, and second thing is you must have a sense of what that answer might be. Estimation. So we're actually working on a simple solution to teach older kids who have missed the bus and they're not going to be interested in arithmetic. And if that is possible and they can figure out percentages and so on, why not? Because these kids are going to start borrowing money and they're going to start repaying. So they need to do that. So this is a second one, and we think that there is a demand for that. The children would love to do that, especially if you challenge them like this. So we will actually, I think what we will do is we will not worry too much about, let's say, the front of the class curriculum. Because I'm addressing the back of the class. Do I want to teach science? Yes, but not the way it is done today. It's like in science you want children to master everything and then you are a good student. But if you learn just one thing, that is not a good student. What I would rather do is actually make all children familiar. There's something like from between 5th grade and 10th grade, children learn something like 450 scientific terms, 450 words. It's actually a vocabulary issue if you reduce it down and say, how many of these 450 words are you familiar with? I say gravity. And the kids say, yeah, I know, isn't that the thing, yes. So he doesn't know Newton. Maybe next time he'll know Newton. Maybe next time he'll say apple fell on his head or whatever. And that's how familiarity begins. That's how we say, did you know Pradeep? Said, yeah, wasn't that the funny guy talking too much? Yeah, I know him. So that's familiarity, and then you get to know the guy and more. So it's exactly the same thing I think with science as well. So I would rather that I start saying everybody should have a basic familiarity. You talk to Ben comes up with references like crazy. So he says, have you heard of this? And you got to say yes or you got to say no. So
I read too many books.
So I think that familiarity is the core of getting the back of the class. So you don't want to be left out. You don't want to be told you're a dumb guy. People from India, have you heard the word duffer? Golfers here? Do you know what a duffer is? What is?
My father played golf.
So what's duffer? Duff is duff in golf? No, somebody told me. If you swing and miss, it's a duff. So in India, everybody's busy telling you are a duffer. That means saying you're no good, you did not go anywhere in life because you did not make it in our classroom. But he can go outside this classroom and do multiple things. That's where we are going. So right now, I'm trying to get this answer, and everybody is asking me this. No, my objective, at least at this point, is not to get experts in science.
Maybe I can answer this question. So,
go ahead.
So these
my spokesman.
Industrial model schools have been around for a long, long time. They're really, really great for the adults who work in the system. They're great for the politicians, they're great for the teachers' unions, they're great for the businesses that supply the schools, right? It's a great scheme for the adults in the system. The kids are the ones who are losing out. And that system with the adults is very, very stable. If you look at how schools are structured in the United States, if you look at how hard change has been to come to schools in the United States. So a head-on assault just can't work. It doesn't work. So the only way you can do this is the approach that Madhav is taking, where you're doing this out-of-school time stuff, you're engaging the students in real learning, and you've got adults who care who are getting involved with that. So in the United States, we're doing charter schools. That's a way to kind of get into this a little bit. But I think I've been to India a couple times. I've been to 16 different cities, I think, my last time I was there. I'm not going to start. And so I think, in my experience of India, very hard to do a direct frontal assault on the existing government education system. So I think this is a very, very powerful approach. Obviously, it's working and growing.
Yeah, again, I didn't want to misconstrue my question of being an assault on the education system, because that's never going to work. But more what you have explained, Madhav, is how you see learning versus knowledge, and where you think knowledge can actually help them. By the way, Sugata Mitra has this story where he actually talks about the British invented the schooling system because they occupied India, and they needed accountants.
No, that's
others, so they needed to be trained in a system to go out there and serve the colonizers.
That's not quite true.
Before we start debating this, I moderate this thing.
Yes.
May I moderate? Thank you. You're so kind.
Jayant has a question.
Jayant has a question.
Yeah, I really enjoyed this talk. Actually, my question was for Nishant. And basically, you were talking about some pretty large numbers in terms of, these devices are in the hands of kids. So in some sense, you have a big distribution network, an app store, if you will, right? And so in an app store, when you think about what motivates people to put their content out, a lot of developers just want their stuff to be used. So I'm sort of curious, given that if there is some opportunity, maybe it's a ways away, but if there is some opportunity for developers to just make content just with the intention of kids using it in some sort of a play, and for them to use it, put it out there so that kids can learn, and that might be their motivation.
Exactly. So we are trying to collaborate as much as we can with creators of content, and we specifically don't use educators. We want to, and I'll quickly give an example here. There's a team of young girls in Haryana. There's actually a village in Haryana close to Hisar, and the entire village plays football. All the girls there play football. A lot of them represent in the national football team. Why, for what reason, not sure. There was probably one coach, and there is one coach who has been driving this, and then it became a community effort. So Pratham has been working with these young girls for literacy. They decided to create a series of videos on how to play football and probably link some science to it for us. What we are going to do is spread that video out to all the places that we are working in, all the 16,000 tablets that we have right now, and pretty much more. Then try and set up local workshops where we'll invite people from the local community who know football, and for them to take workshops. Soccer.
This country doesn't know football.
Right. Yes.
Translated.
Yeah, that got translated. I think that got translated.
So the content that Pratham has created right now is open source, and we are actively putting it on a lot of platforms. One such platform is Colibri, which is run by an organization, Learning Equality. They have created an open source software for content distribution. We are working with them on trying to accommodate our needs and put up our content there. We are also actively working with a lot of other groups of educators and content creators in science and math space to create content with us. What is important is the context. So I was giving someone an example just a few minutes back that if you try and explain fractions using a pi, or your video has got a pi explaining fractions, it's not going to get through to the kind of children that we are working with. You've got to have the context, and especially in India, there are all these different states and every state has its own context. That's why we create content in 11 languages, and we have got local units where collaborators come in and try to contribute.
But the answer to his question is, yeah, collaboration is welcome.
It's more than welcome, and we have got a portal coming up in a month's time to substantiate it.
I can go without the mic.
You might need a mic. Thing is, Viren's running legs are, clearly have, look at him going for it.
Thank you so much, and I'm glad I could come. So, are you guys too focused on digital, like media? Why not, I don't know. Is it every content has to be digital? Like you talk about basic arithmetic. You can explain the pi using, I don't know, wooden structures. Or going beyond digital, not just tablets, I don't know, English is not possible, I agree, but a basic arithmetic, yes.
So the name of this project that Nishant was telling you about, 1,000 villages, is called hybrid learning. Okay, so we're using electricity, diesel and air or whatever you want. So we were never only wedded to digital. So we are actually also trying suppose if I give digital, because these tablets are shared and the kids don't necessarily have the same amount of time that other kids might get in privileged circumstances, which may be good or bad. But we give them printed material as well, and individually for them, because there are things that you have to do with your fingers and hands that are important. We are asking them to do things like, for example, Nishant told you about how the children like to create their own videos, and that is very important. So instead of it's bothered me that we have lessons in the textbook saying, children, this is called the root, this is called the stem, and so on. I mean, these are rural kids. They're playing in the mud all the time, and they know they help their parents in agriculture, and you're telling them these stupid things. So we actually said, okay, we had a young lady, one of our leaders in Pratham, go out to the village and say, I'm a city girl, I don't know what plants and trees are like, will you give me a tour of the village? And they took her around and made a map and said, look, this is the neem tree, the leaves are like this is the banyan tree, this is and so this is all done, and we recorded that on a video and spread that around all these 6,000 tablets. And then asked the kids, can you make these videos? They said, yeah, piece of cake. What's the problem? And then some did exactly like what they saw, and others went beyond. And now this is becoming a cycle where the kids now, for the summer, as before I left, the assignment given to the kids, not by me, by all others, was summer drinks. What kind of summer drinks do you make at home? Let them figure it out. Is it science? Well, it doesn't have to be, but there are some people who are going to get very curious about why we are doing this and why. And so actually this will become a part of what we are doing. This is a part of their learning. They will learn from the surroundings and they'll make a recording, they'll make a presentation. So the way this is being done is that, again, Nishant said it, that we are using the tablets, the digital stuff as a trigger to other things. So we want them to use that, to use the information that they get, and we want them to also gather the information and put it together. And that's where the knowledge building will come. We don't know exactly how, not at this moment, but over a period of time I'm sure it will happen.
Thank you, Madhav. That was a very good answer.
Thank you.
Yes, that was also my rather belated method to cut you off. Anup.
Madhav, so one of the things that's becoming interesting out here is, even in the same environment, some kids succeed, some don't, and that the individual's mindset, growth mindset is becoming, or whether it is grit or curiosity, learning. So there are many things beyond just the numbers or the language that could also be. So I'm wondering if you guys are thinking in your pedagogy, and how do you encourage those kinds of thinking in children? Because to Akhtar's question, they've got to survive the long term. They won't have your support, and with the right attitudes, that can change the trajectory somewhat.
Look, I think where we are coming around to is that, let's say, success may mean different things for different people. It's not just coming to the front of the class. So the most critical skill that everybody has to learn is learning to learn. And how do you actually deliver that, or how do you get them to learn and be curious and interested in learning is the challenge. So all these things that we are trying to do, I think centrality will come to, are you learning? Are you a learner, or have you given up on learning? I see that the back of the class increasingly is giving up on learning, and you have to tell them, no, you can learn, you can be good at anything, you can be good at something, and that is where I think we'll have to go.
That's good.
I mean, this is a really important point. The K-12 school that you guys all experience and the colleges you experience, it's all about ingestion and regurgitation. I call this the excellent sheep model. Especially kids today in these high-performing high schools, they're just all these hoops that the adults have designed for them, and the kids jump through the hoops one after another, right? They don't know how to move the hoops around, and they surely don't learn how to design their own hoops, right? And what we need in the world is people who are risk takers and innovators and creators. And we've created in industrial model schools where risk is punished. Right? If you look at a 2-year-old, what are they doing there? Exploring the world, or putting their hands every place. You hope they don't burn themselves too much or shock themselves too much. But the children are born scientists. They make experiments constantly, and then we send them to school for 13 years, and we beat it out of them. If you look at a science class, it's a cookbook class, right? Follow this recipe, right? And so the approach that Pratham is taking is let kids learn, trust them to learn. I mean, the two things our industrial model schools do is we don't trust kids to learn, right? It's so rigid because they might not learn something. Oh my God! So we better make this really structured thing. So the more, my view is, get rid of grades and grade levels and curriculum and textbooks and teachers, and just let kids build stuff with wood and paper and metal and notes and words and paint and video, exactly. And imagine if kids spent all their days creating and experimenting and imagining, right, instead of ingesting and regurgitating.
Thank you much.
I think we've got time for about 2 more questions. It's 8:15, and the bar closes at 9. So,
that's very relevant there. Will somebody get a mic there?
yeah, I'll come over there.
Okay, so I've got 2 questions.
Go for it.
So I heard you saying that all the information the children learn is already preloaded on the software. So how do you know when, like, the group of children have surpassed that level that they're watching? How do you know when it's time to reload another, like a more advanced maths curriculum or an English curriculum onto the device, and how do you track that, basically?
So in the last, like the assessment tool that I was talking to you about, we have those assessment tools. So at the moment we have some assessment tool that says, as a child, now is a child able to read first grade or second grade level texts and so on, and same with English and math and so on. We do have assessment, as Pradeep was saying, before and after. Before we get into the intervention, we test all the children and say where they are at, and then after the intervention, we check where they're going. But I think going forward, we have to now recalibrate and say, look, those testing tools are not enough. For example, without taking too much time, I'm seriously thinking that we should be teaching communication and not language. And so I was fascinated. I hadn't thought about it. One of our friends I met in the Bay Area, she has a little baby and they're teaching the baby sign language. And I thought, that's fantastic. Why not teach sign language? Because that's communication. That can be universal communication as well. And that can be a way of learning what a language is, the components are. So I think we'll have to change the way we look at it. But yes, start with something and keep on, checking every now and then. We have to do that.
Darshan, did you get a mic? You did not get a mic. May I give you one?
Coming right over, Darshana.
We're just trying to make sure Viren gets a workout today.
It's good, it's good. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. That was a very interesting discussion. I have one question. I want to know about what you found out about the approach of different genders with your educational, with the apps and all you're using. Especially as far as girls go, we find that they get discouraged at learning math in the classroom, whereas if you're using this in small groups where they may not feel that, oh, they're a girl, so they shouldn't be learning all that, they cannot learn all this, it's not cool for a girl to do that. Do you find that there is a difference? Do you find that girls are more apt to studying more math and then feel more comfortable and confident in the classroom when they go back?
Are you seeing gender bias data?
Thank you. Ben, you wanted to say something?
You answer first, and I'll answer second.
So I think that's a very good question you asked. One of the things we found, and in Rajasthan and UP especially, what we find is in this age group of 6th grade to 8th grade, 50% children go to private schools, and which is more boys are sent there. Okay, and government schools tend to be more, the girls are more, I'm not saying all girls are going to government schools, but that is happening. When we gave the tablets, the groups were formed in the village neighborhoods, and we told them, just get all your friends together. What we find, and I was amazed to find this, that first of all, the private school and government school children sat together. They were not working separately. It somehow becomes an integration tool. Girls and boys are sitting together, although many of these English medium schools are boys' schools or whatever. So actually this becomes a much more natural playgroup kind of a situation for the kids, and they play together. I'll give you a couple of anecdotes because I don't have a complete research on this. I was in a village where I'd heard that this duo, brother-sister duo, had made a video about parakeets, and I'd seen it. I thought, why would you make a parakeet film? I was in that village and I asked them, and the girl was standing shyly, quietly on one side, and the boy was there and he was talking to me. I said, why did you do this? He said, we like the birds, they are ours, so we made the film. I was like, what kind of question are you asking? So I said, no, what I mean is, why didn't you make a video about that goat that's standing there? So they looked at each other, and the girl jumped to action immediately. She grabbed the tablet and she told the boy, go stand there. She became the camera person, and the boy, who probably wanted to show off, was standing there and said, this is cameraman, whatever, and they started making the video. The girl actually had the technical role, which fascinated me. It's not saying, no, this is not, I handle the camera, I'm the tech, no. So I think there is an even division of the girls who want to do this and the girls who don't want to do this. That is something that we keep seeing. And girls, you'll see many videos, I had not noticed it before, but now I watch more videos and I see a lot of girls doing filming and so on. Then there are mothers who jump into the act. Rukmini is saying that she was in a village, and I've seen this as well. Kids were messing up an experiment. There was some experiment about a leaf and a magnetized pin on top or something or the other. And the leaf always sank for some reason. So there was this woman standing with a gungat like this. And the kids were trying this. And finally she said, get out. You don't know what you're doing. She took the gungat away and started showing them how to do it. Mothers are actually learning. So this is going into the hands of women because it's at the doorstep, it's in their neighborhood. We're increasingly getting demands from mothers of preschoolers saying, how about giving something for us? And so our people said, so what about child nutrition and all that? They said, yeah, but I'd love to have some other recipes as well. So actually they are demanding things that they've heard are on YouTube and so on. So I think there is a certain democratization with these tablets becoming available in a library format for everybody. And now with something that Nishant didn't mention is setting up what those micro clouds or mini clouds or whatever they are, and then connecting to a bigger cloud. I think we'll be able to give a very interesting, true experience of the net, and which would be very interesting to do. But it's
wonderful to see this level of engagement.
I just two quick stories. So with DreamBox, and this was back in the early days of our testing in 2009, 2010. We were testing with classrooms and teachers, and the teachers would tell us that the kids who because of gender or ethnicity felt embarrassed about being good at math would sort of hold back in the classroom. But because every kid was sitting at their own laptop using it, these kids would zoom ahead because there wasn't any sort of peer observation. So that was one kind of interesting takeaway. The other thing was that that we found, so we were initially selling DreamBox because it was online math learning to homes, because there was no sales cycle. You just, a parent puts in their credit card and kids start using it. And what we found was that there were parents who were learning math along with their kids, right? So there was this kind of, sort of learning alongside kind of activity. And so we actually made some investments to help make that part better.
Great. Thank you, Ben.
I think we want to take a question from Facebook Live. How do we do that, Supriya?
I can just read it out.
Okay.
Okay, we have about 6 questions from Facebook. That's great engagement, but we'll just go with one. Which state has been the most challenging for generating engagement in learning, and why?
None. Kids are the same everywhere. Our digital project is in 3 states. Uttar Pradesh, one of the most backward areas in Uttar Pradesh, then Rajasthan and Maharashtra. Engagement is not a problem. If you let them be engaged and don't try to scare them with words like curriculum and all that, then they're fine. So I don't see that as a problem with engagement.
Anything else?
You have 5 more questions. Maybe you can choose one more.
Is there anything else there? Pick one more. And my panel promises to keep it to a 1-sentence response.
Okay.
Yes.
Are tablets or devices also being used or planned to be used in Pratham's vocational training programs? Is there expected growth for teaching technology to this age group to improve their employability?
This is already being used, and we are trying to reduce time for the basic learning. Like in any vocation, you need to know your tools, you need to know what to do with them and so on. So before you start your practical work, there's a lot to be learned. And that is what they're being used for now. They're used in the regular vocational training centers, and we are trying to take that to the 14 to 18 age group in the schools and junior colleges or whatever they're called. Okay.
With that, with respect to time, should we cut it off?
It's really up to the group. I mean, we've got this place for about another half an hour. I felt like it would be a good idea to let everybody stretch their legs and mingle. And
one more question.
Yeah, that's an important one.
Look out for your best.
I'm play my card wisely. So in the U.S., we have the Common Core state standards that allow us to build content for reading or math that says that you're doing the right thing at grade level. In India, how do you know that the content that you are open source getting from everyone is actually getting kids to what they should be learning at each grade level?
Madhav, can I take this? So the Gates Foundation invested in Common Core. I was just reading about this, something like $400 million. Anyone here from the Gates Foundation? No? Okay. Oh, we're on live. Hi, Bill. They've basically given up on Common Core. Because the problem with Common Core is the idea that one size fits all, that every kid learns the same thing at the same time in the same way. And that's exactly the wrong thing for kids. right? And so the approach that Pratham is taking is local, it's localized, it's what kids are interested in, it's going to be different in different places, and that's a good thing.
No, slightly more focused answer would be to say the content is out there. If you are a sixth grader, but if you have not learned what you were supposed to learn in second grade, then you can learn that. If you are a fifth grader, you want to learn what's in the 8th grade, you can learn that as well. And that's when the group sits together. It's a very interesting dynamic as to how they explain things to each other and so on. So, and this is the thing about the internet as well, that it's out there and anybody can access what they want. If you you can tell the child that this is what you need to learn before you learn this and so on. We have not started this, what's this, adaptive learning. We've not done that yet, but there are many others who are doing this. So we are not doing that yet. But if you want to learn addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, geometry, algebra, things are out there. We have to graduate to figuring out what children will like. I can tell you, I think we've figured out how to engage children. That's the main thing that Pradeep has been talking about. Once you do that, I think kids know where to go. But I think I'm sticking my neck out on this. We'll get there. I don't think I know the answer yet.
One final question.
Yes, go for it. Because we haven't dealt with my problem. Remember, I started this topic with saying I have a problem.
Well,
I'd like to finish describing my problem.
Final.
Okay, so this is my last question. This question is for Nitesh. That's your name, right?
Nishant.
Nishant. Okay, I'm sorry. So you spoke about how you need help, and I didn't really understand the problem. When you gave the example kama and then it changed to tama, I didn't understand that. If you can give me a detailed understanding of the problem, that would be nice, because I did work with speech recognition before, and I was just interested to know if I could help or not. That's all. That was my question. Thank you.
And just to be distinct, the reason why we have an open bar is because we have another 30 minutes. So if you guys can take this offline. I think this needs a deeper dive than the rest of this group is. Yeah, no, we'll do a deeper dive. In fact, that's exactly what I'd like to have happen in the next half an hour. Is if folks who want to do a deeper dive into topics, who want to get engaged, everybody's hanging around over here. So with that, what I'm going to do is, I'm going to thank these fine gentlemen. Very nice. Thank you. Thank you very much. And most importantly, I'm going to thank this lady standing in front of me, who is Supriya, who has been basically, these guys just come along and pontificate. Somebody actually has to put this whole thing together. Thank you much.